We continue now at the top of Daf 25a Daf in Meseches Gittin. This is Gittin Daf 25a. On the previous summit, the Gemara brought a statement from Rebbe Lozer that if you have a chalitza that's done at night, or if you have a chalitza that's done with the left shoe, so that's not going to be a good chalitza, but it is going to be good enough of a chalitza in order to disqualify her from performing yibum with the brothers. And Rebbe Lozer's statement continues, Katan v'anpilya, but if you have a situation of chalitza with a minor, or with an anpilya, which is a soft cloth shoe, psulos, that's not going to be a good chalitza, ve'ein posels. It's not even going to be enough of a chalitza to disqualify her from having yibum with the brothers. Rashi says, Katan v'anpilya, kilson shall beged, again, a cloth shoe, lav chalitza klal. These are cases that are not chalitza at all, unlike the cases on the previous summit of the left shoe, or a situation of at night. The ish v'nal ksuvim v'parsha, because it says in the parsha, ish, and it says nal, it has to be an adult, it has to be a shoe. Vim lo yachbot ish v'gomer, that's what it says in the pasuk. And so therefore, in that situation, again, it's not going to be a chalitza even to disqualify her from the brothers. And the Gemara continues, returning to the cases of our Mishnah, which were gittin, that were written not lishma. Zeiri Amar, Zeiri says, Kulan ein posel. In all the cases of our Mishnah, the get does not even have a reach haget, it doesn't disqualify her from kahuna, chutz min ha'achron, except for the last case of the Mishnah. The last case of the Mishnah, again, was the case that used breira. So we said in the Mishnah that it's not a good get, but it is considered a reach haget. It's enough of a get that it disqualifies her from the kahuna. As Rashi says, l'chumra, we say, yesh breira. V'chein amar Ravasi, and similarly says Ravasi, kulan ein posel, chutz min ha'achron. All the cases of the Mishnah, they don't disqualify for her from kahuna, except for the last case of the Mishnah. For Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Yochanan says, Af achron nami eino posel. Even the last case of the Mishnah with breira, it does not disqualify her from the kahuna. V'azur Rabbi Yochanan l'taimin. The Gemara says Rabbi Yochanan follows his opinion. Damar Ravasi, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, because Ravasi says that Rabbi Yochanan says, so achen shecholku, when brothers divide up property, let's say they inherit property from their father and they're dividing it all up, l'kucho, saying they're considered to be purchasing from one another, umachzirin zela zebi yovel, and then when yovel comes, just like anyone who buys property, they have to return the property to one another at Yovel time. It returns to its original state, and then they redivide. And the idea over here is, why are the achen, why are the brothers considered to be lekuchos? Because ein breira. We don't say breira. If we said breira, then they'd be considered to be yarshin. They'd be inheritors, because whatever property they take, retroactively it is clear that that was their property all along. But that is not the case according to Rabbi Yochanan. We say there's no breira. We say they are considered lekuchos. Rashi says lekuchos ain't the ein breira. Again, there's no breira. The ikol lemechash chelak shenat al zeh hayoroi lachiv. You can say the portion that this brother took, maybe that was the other brother's portion. V'achlifu, maybe they swapped portions. V'ainu lekicha, essentially that's purchasing. V'chozer b'yovel, and the rule by purchasing is it returns in yovel l'tchilaso to the way it was originally. Misham mitzvahs yovel, that's the mitzvah of yovel. V'adar shakle kedemei kar, and then they could take back the property. But again, it's as if they redivide when yovel comes. And so the Gemara says with Tzricha, now we need both statements of Rabbi Yochanan, even though both statements of Rabbi Yochanan seem to be the same, that we don't say breira. D'yitmar baha kam Rabbi Yochanan de'ein breira, mishum de'ba'inan lo lishma. If we only had the case of our Mishnah, I would say that in that case Rabbi Yochanan said ein breira because there's a halacha of law, it has to be lishma, and this is not considered lishma. Avol hasan, but over there, mecher hu da'amar achman l'hadr b'yovel, a sale, the Torah says, needs to go back in yovel. Avol yerushal matana lo, but if you have a case of yerushal, like this case, or matana, gift, those do not need to go back at Yovel. V'yashmin and Sadin, if I only had the case of the field, meaning again the case of the brothers, Mishum de l'chumra, because that's already a stringency. We're being strict and we're saying they're machzir and they have to return it at Yovel. So l'chumra will say breira. Inami ketchilo, or maybe we'll say that it has to go the way it was originally when the property was passed down. It goes back to the fact that it wasn't in any particular brother's hands. It goes back at Yovel. Aval but over here, Eimalo, I might say that's not the case. So tzricha, that's why we need to say in our Mishnah as well that there is no breira. Rashi explains the l'chumra machzir and chumra, the fact that they have to return all the property and redivide it, that's a chumra. V'inami have a misavgal on azul l'chumra. Even if we didn't know whether there's breira or not, we would be strict. Avoleno posel kulu, but to say that she's not disqualified from the kuna, that's a leniency. V'lav de pshita dein breira lo azul l'kula. If not for the fact that it was obvious that there's no breira, we would not be lenient. And Rashi continues, Inami Kitzchila, or you could say that by the case of the Yerusha, the reason why it returns at Yovel is because it has to return to the way it originally was, meaning, since originally it wasn't divided at all, it was just property that was inherited by all the brothers, it could have nothing to do with Breira. It could just be that it returns to its original state as it was inherited at the moment of the inheritance. That happens again at Yovel. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. Boy minei Rav Hoshia me Rav Yehuda. Rav Hoshia asked Rav Yehuda the following question. Amar lelavler, if he says to the scribe, Ksov le'ezu sheteitze bepesach tchila, write it for whoever comes out the door first. Mahu, what's the halacha? Amar Le, so he said to him, Tanisu, we already learned the answer. Yes, or Mikan, we learned in our mission it says more than that. Amar Lelav or Kosov Ksov Le'ezu She'ertza Garish, write it for whoever I want, for whoever I decide, that's who I'll divorce. Pasal Garish Bo, so he's not allowed to use that for a Gerishin. Alma Ein Breira, so you see from our Mishnah, Ein Breira, we don't say Breira. And the same thing is true over here. When whoever comes out the door first, essentially we'd be employing Breira and saying whoever comes out first, that's the one retroactively we see that the get was written for. But we see from our Mishnah that we do not say Breira. And the Gemara continues, Eisvei, we have the following question. Ha'omer Levanav harini shochet as ha'pesach al mi sheyala mikem rishon lYerushalayim. If somebody says to his sons, I am shechting the Korban Pesach, I'm registering it to whoever comes first to Yerushalayim, whoever goes up first to Yerushalayim. Kevan shenichnas rishon rosho v'rubo, when the first son enters his head and the majority of his body into Yerushalayim, Zocha bechelko, he merits his portion of that Korban Pesach, umizakes echav yimo, and he's also mizake his brothers together with him. They also are registered along with him with this Korban Pesach. And so Rav Oshia is suggesting from this Mishnah that it's employing Breira. We're saying whichever son comes first, and retroactively we see whichever son comes first, that's the one that's registered for the Korban Pesach. So Amar Le, so he said to him, Rav Yehuda said to Rav Oshia, Hoshia Bri, Hoshia my son, Ma inyan Psachim etzel Gittin. What kind of connection is there between Psachim and Gittin? Hoyetzmar Allah, but it was said on that halacha, that Mishnah in Psachim, Amar Rav Yochanan says, Kedei lezarzon b'mitzvahs. That wasn't a real case of Breira. That was just a way to encourage them to do the mitzvahs. He's trying to encourage them to go quickly to do the mitzvah, to go to Yerushalayim. And Dekonami will bring a proof from the wording of the Mishnah also. Dekatani, because what does it say in the Mishnah? It says, Kevan shenichnas rishon rosho v'rubo, when the first son comes, his head and the majority of his body in Yerushalayim, Zocha bechelko mezake esachavimo. He's Zoch in his portion, and he's mezake his brothers together with him. So he amrid b'shlomadam ninu meikara shaper. So if you say really they're all registered from the beginning, then it makes sense. This was just a way of encouraging them to go, but really they were all registered in the Korban Pesach. Eloi amrid deloim ninu. But if you're going to say that he didn't register everyone at the beginning, so la'achar shchita, so after he already shechs the Korban Pesach, mika misman, is it possible at that point to register them for the Korban Pesach? It's too late. Obviously they were all registered from the beginning. Vatanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, nimninu moshchen yadein mimenu, ad sheyishchit, you're able to register, you're able to withdraw until the time of the Shechita. It's until the time of the Shechita that you can do this for the Korban Pesach. And so over here the case is, he's saying to his sons, Hareini shochet as HaPesach, it must be he's including all of them before the time of the Shechita. After the Shechita it's already too late. And so it's clear that all that's happening over here is he's being mizar as his sons, he's trying to encourage them, but it's not really using Breira. And the Gemara continues, Tanya Nami Hachu, we have a brisa that supports this, that it's really just a way of encouraging them, because it says in the brisa, Ma'isa v'kidmu banos labanim, there was an incident where the daughters actually came before the sons. V'nimtzu banos rizos uvanim shvelim. It came out that it was the daughters, they were the ones who were quick to do the mitzvahs, and the sons were slow to do the mitzvah. And so you see from here that it's all really an inyan, it's all really an idea of zrizos, of being quick to do a mitzvah, of encouraging them to do the mitzvahs. And the Gemara continues, Amar Abaya says, he asked him a question which has to do with das acherim, has to do with other people's intentions. And then he gives him an answer that has to do with das atzma, with his own intention. And then he goes ahead and he asks him a question from another case which is das acherim. And Rashi explains, Abaya says, Abaya is asking a question. He's very surprised, Rav Yehuda Rav Oshia, with this conversation, this back and forth between Rav Yehuda and Rav Oshia. Because the original question was as follows: In other words, the person says, I'm writing the get for whoever comes first. So the person making the condition, it's not in their control. They're saying that whatever this other person does, whoever's first, that's who it's for. That was the original question. And so then he answered the question from our Mishnah, where the person said, I'm writing the get for whoever I decide to give the get to, whichever wife I want to give it to. That's a case of Breira, but it's under his own control. He's going to be deciding later. So Dilma Tola b'das atzmo leslan Breira. Maybe in a situation where it's das atzmo, so there maybe we don't hold the Breira. Because from the very fact that in the beginning he makes this kind of tanai, it shows that he's completely undecided. You can't then say, oh, Breira retroactively, it's clear that all along he wanted to divorce this wife. It's not clear at all, because he himself it's clear from the husband himself that he's mesupik, he's not sure. That's what it means, poseach al shtei sifim, he has no idea who he wants to divorce. So to say later, after he chooses, that it was clear all along, maybe you don't say that. But in a case where it's dependent on other people, it's dependent on other factors, so gomer b'daite me karle, so Shetetse, the person who's actually deciding this, meaning the husband, he's clear. He wants to give it to whoever comes out first. So he has a clear decision, and then maybe we would say brera in that situation. And so then again, the question continued, so the answer was from the Mishnah, which is Tola B'das Atzmo. That doesn't make sense. And then we bring this case of Karban Pesach, which again is Tola B'das Acherim. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rava, so Rava responds, Rava says to Abaye, my kushya, what's your difficulty over here? Dilma demandis le brera loshna Tola B'das Atzmo v'loshna Tola B'das Acherim, is le brera. Maybe the one who holds a brera, he doesn't make any distinction between Tola B'das Atzmo and Tola B'das Acherim. In other words, Abaye's question was built on the idea that the original question had to do with brera, had to do with Tola B'das Acherim. Then you bring a proof from Tola B'das Atzmo. Then you're asking a question from Tola B'das Acherim. Rava says, why is that difficult? Maybe the one who holds a brera doesn't make distinctions between Tola B'das Atzmo and Tola B'das Acherim. Umandeles le brera, and similarly, the one who doesn't hold a brera, Loshna Tola B'das Atzmo, v'loshna Tola B'das Acherim. Les le brera, it doesn't matter if it's Tola B'das Atzmo or Tola B'das Acherim. He doesn't hold a brera. So that would answer Abaye's question. There are no distinctions between these two cases, as Abaye is suggesting. Amar le Rav Mesharshi le Rava, but Rav Mesharshi says to Rava, that's not true, there is a distinction. But Rabbi Yehuda, but what about the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda? The Tola B'das Atzmo les le brera, that in a case where it's in his own control, it's Tola in his own das, Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold the brera. But in the case of Tola B'das Acherim, he does hold the brera. And where do we see that Rabbi Yehuda makes this distinction? Tola B'das Atzmo les le brera. So the first part, the fact that in the case of Tola B'das Atzmo, Rabbi Yehuda does not hold the brera. The Tanya, as we learned in a brayso. Let's say somebody buys wine from the kusim, from among the Samaritans. Omer, and he says, Shnei lugin shani asad lahafrish, 2 lugin that in the future I will separate, harei ein truma, that will be truma. Asara ma'aser rishon, and the 10 that I will separate, that will be ma'aser rishon. Tisha ma'aser sheni, and the 9 that I will separate, that will be ma'aser sheni. And Rashi explains, Mibein hakusim kodem gezerah, this is before the gezerah, that you're not allowed to have wine from the kusim. V'ein lo kli lahafresh trumos u'ma'aser spend. The point over here is, he's buying this wine, he doesn't have a separate vessel in which to place, in which to separate the truma and the ma'aser. V'utzarech lishtos, and so he needs to drink, so he needs to find some way to separate the trumas and ma'asers. V'kusim geirei emes choshev lehu. Now Rashi explains that in this Gemara we're understanding that kusim are considered true converts. They have a status of Jews. Ve'ein Eretz Yisrael nifkas mikdushas al yadeim. Therefore, Eretz Yisrael doesn't lose its kedusha, so to speak, from the fact that they're the ones that own the property. However, ve'ein chashudan al ma'asers v'al truma. However, nevertheless, kusim, even though they're Jewish, they're still suspect that they don't separate proper ma'aser and truma. V'lo ka'amei haaretz. They're not like amei haaretz sheruban ma'asrin, where most of the amei haaretz actually do take off ma'aser. V'kulan ma'afrish and truma, and all amei haaretz take off truma. Aval kusim chashudim al hakol. Kusim are suspect on everything. That's why we're selecting kusim over here. The point is, if you buy from kusim, you're definitely going to need to take off ma'aser. And so what the person does is he says, what I will separate in the future, retroactively, so to speak, will be clarified to be the truma, the ma'aser, etc. Shnei lugin mitoch meya, that's 2 lugin out of 100, that's the shear of truma. Harein truma besocho, that's going to be truma within this vessel. And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Chafhei Amud Beis.